Yeah, I just want to say something about the finances. I mean, because of the media censure we've had over the last 5 years, it has had an impact on us trying to raise money to try and survive. You know, it's because of the media censure that we have been unable to get the story out for people to hear about what happened and then to contribute money to help us, you see. So, you know, we are at a point now where we're on the brink of winning the Diaz case, but, you know, financially we're sinking very fast. What happened to me? I came to the G8 summit working as an Indymedia journalist. I'm an environmental journalist. You know, from London with some of my friends and a few other protesters. I arrived in Genova about 10 days before the raid. We moved down to Diaz Pascoli, set up Indymedia on the 3rd floor, and across the street in Diaz Pertini there were many people sleeping there. It was just a kind of a sleeping dormitory. It had pacifists, environmentalists, socialists, journalists, no one dangerous or threatening that was there. And, you know, we've later discovered, you know, the police knew this. Anyway, about 10 to midnight on the 21st of July, I heard that there was an Italian came running into the school and said that there was a raid underway, and so I decided to try and cross the road back to Diaz Pascoli. As soon as I got out of the gate, I was confronted with 300 police coming down the street, all in full riot gear and extremely angry. I was hit over the shoulder blade and was stunned standing there, and then 10 policemen surrounded me. I was kneecapped, put on the floor in the first attack. Then a policeman came back a few minutes later and kicked me in the spine. Because I am a light person, he hooked me up on his foot, and I was kicked out into the street. And this policeman was laughing, and they proceeded to have a game of football with me. 8 of my ribs on this side were broken, smashed. My lung was punctured many times. I suffered massive internal bleeding. My hand was broken in this attack. Then it stopped for a minute or so, and then and you will see in the video footage the third attack on me, where I was kicked in the teeth. I lost all of my teeth at the top, 10 teeth, and I was batoned on the head. I was then left unconscious in a coma on the street for about 15-20 minutes without medical aid. I was one of the first to arrive at San Martino Hospital. I was immediately put into intensive care. The doctors did not think I was going to survive. I woke up 2 o'clock the next day, Sunday afternoon. I very quickly realised I was under arrest and I was being accused of being a terrorist when I'm actually a journalist. I was held under arrest for 3 days. There were many attempts by the same policeman who tried to kill me to take me to Bolzaneto. If I had been transferred to Bolzaneto, I would have died there. In fact, we have 5 doctors on trial for the abuse that happened at Bolzaneto. I was finally released on late on Wednesday night. I was transferred back up to the 10th floor of San Martino. Then Thursday morning, the world media came, and for the first time I managed to tell the world what had happened. At this stage there were only 6 of us left in Italy that could tell the prosecutors and the Italian people what had happened, because Berlusconi had signed a deportation order. I flew back to London on the 4th of August. It took me many weeks and months to recover from my injuries. It took me a long time to stand upright again. I still have to have operations on my spine and on my hand. I delayed these operations because of the trial. I returned back here 1 year later, and I met Heidi Giuliani for the first time. She had heard about my story, and she said that she was adopting me as her son to replace Carlo. She also said that if we could get justice at Diaz, it would be justice for Carlo. And so this is one of the things that drives me to bring this case. It took about a year, 14 months for the facts to become to come out, by the prosecutor's office. Discovering the police had planted Molotov cocktails at the school. There was another policeman that has stabbed himself, this sort of thing. But what I'm trying to say is that it's been a very long fight from being accused as a terrorist to putting 76 policemen on trial for human rights abuses. I am just a normal, simple human being like yourselves, and probably like Mr. Grillo's viewers. Okay, I'm just a journalist. I'm not dangerous at all whatsoever. But I was accused of all of these things for a year or so. If the police had managed to transfer me to Bolzaneto, I would have gone to Pavia prison for 15 years based on false charges. About a year after the raid, it became apparent what kind of men were on this raid. There was the anti-terrorist squad. There were 2 units of special riot cops that had training in America. Some crime divisions, DGOS. However, when I felt I was being, when I was being attacked, they were definitely trying to kill me. One of the policemen said in English, "You no journalist, you black bloc, we are going to kill black bloc." So I knew then it was going to be very hard to survive this, if ever. Much later on, it became apparent that I was not the only case of attempted killing at Scuola Diaz. I think there are about 7 recorded cases of attempted murder described by the prosecutors. And they are, Melanie Jonash, German protester on the 1st floor of Scuola Diaz. She has never recovered from the raid. Thomas Albright, He had his head split from here to here. He was in a coma for 4 days. Lena Zucker, another German protester, she had internal injuries and fractured skull. Martyrs and Niels, and there are many more cases like this. What we faced at Escuela Diaz was pure fascism. In my country, with English policemen, we don't expect to deal with their politics, their personal politics as policemen. They are just supposed to do their job. At Escuela Diaz, there was all the fascist politics mixed in with their job. Right, and this is what we experienced at Escuela Diaz. So when Gianfranco Fini tells me he is a reformed fascist, I do not believe him. Fascists do not change. So whatever this man says, I do not believe him. He is very dangerous to Italy. People need to understand. When I was at San Martino Hospital, I mean, all told, about 63 of us were taken there. By Wednesday morning, there were only, I think about 6 of us left. The rest have been dragged out of their beds and taken to Bolsonaro on the orders of Fini, okay, and Castelli, the Legal Nord Justice Minister, because they wanted to get us away from the journalists, okay, but they also wanted to finish the job off, you could say. I mean, by Tuesday, after the hospital had checked the law, they realised the police must have warrants and stuff like this to take us out of the hospital, and they didn't have, and so we had doctors blocking the police inside the hospital to prevent Diaz victims from being dragged out. I mean, on Sunday night, even some of the same attackers from Diaz came up to San Martino, grabbed the people they had been beating at 4 a.m. in the morning, and they still had broken arms, legs and everything, untreated, taken to Bolsonaro, given no food or water, lined up against the wall, beaten randomly on many occasions, okay, right? The women were threatened with rape, okay? I mean, do I need to paint you a picture here of how bad Bolsonaro was? I mean, we've already had indications from the court that what happened at Diaz was random and spontaneous, but at Bolsonaro it was systematic torture. I mean, not of the kind that happens at Guantanamo Bay, but it's still torture. It's psychological, it's mental, it's physical. Kangaroo courts. If you have to walk between a line of 30 these carabinieri, special carabinieri that drafted into Bolsonaro, you are kicked to death almost. People walked out with tons more injuries out of Bolsonaro than out of Diaz. We can't even sometimes distinguish from where you got injuries at Diaz and at Bolsonaro, which is important for the case. We need to differentiate, you see. So, I mean, and what we found, in our investigations was, the planning for Diaz and goes back weeks, months before Giotto, okay, on the right wing side. It wasn't part of the left wing government plan, but it was bolted on after the election, okay, and so they'd been planning what had happened at Bolsonaro for a while. Well, as you can expect about the media coverage, with Berlusconi owning 90% of the TV stations and like half the newspapers, we were never going to be able to get the full story out, and we never have done so in the last 5 years. I mean, the truth is just beginning to come out now, because there's been a big sea change in attitudes. However, Berlusconi did not control the international media, and so what I then embarked on doing from a few months after the raid was talking with the BBC, Channel 4, Associated Press, Reuters, some German TV companies, Spanish, American, CNN, and telling them about Fini. And every time Fini left Italy, he was always asked a question about the Diaz. I mean, let me give you an incident of how I managed to piss him off, if I can swear. In January of this year, Fini came to London to try and shake hands with Tony Blair. He needed the photo for his election. Tony Blair refused to meet him because of Scuola Diaz. Fini asked for a press conference with Jacques Straw to talk about the Iraqi war, but I had an Associated Press journalist stand up, and the first question was about Scuola Diaz. And Fini, he flew into a rage, okay? He got very angry and he stormed out of the press conference. All of the journalists stood up and said, "Oh, why has he called us here at 8 o'clock in the morning for this?" And then Martin Benedict, the AP journalist, then explained to all of the rest of the journalists, right, about Scuola Diaz. So, you know, for Fini to become the world statesman, he needs to operate outside Italy. I make sure I put him out of business. And it's worked, the tactic. Okay, it damaged him during the elections here in Italy. Okay, I mean, I've obviously there have been a few left-wing newspapers like Liberace and Il Manifesto that have written about the case, but this only reaches a small part of, you know, the Italian public. I understand they don't read so many newspapers like we do in the UK. Also, I think you need to know that Berlusconi threatened the TV companies. He threatened the advertisers that if the management showed footage of the raid, they would lose advertising revenue. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing we've been fighting against for a long time. I mean, the media coverage is beginning to improve. TG3 are talking about doing a documentary. La Repubblica has also had a change of attitude about the case. Also, you know, some of the other TV channels like Canal 7, they're beginning to show a very great interest, want to do comprehensive pieces of work, you know, for the Italian public. And so I'm very hopeful now that the truth will finally get out of what happened on that night. I have had a lot of pressure on me from the defendants, from Alleanza Nazionale, from the policemen's lawyers. I've had death threats against me, against witnesses, against other plaintiffs and victims. We are all constantly terrified coming back here that you know, we may end up in prison or worse, be injured or killed. You know, one particular incident, a witness was threatened with his life by 2 policemen at Brignoli station a couple of months ago. You know, and told never to come back to Genoa. It's very hard to, you know, get the plaintiffs back here, you know, to come to terms with what happened, to deal with the trial process, and to deal with these threats. And these threats are not going to go away. I mean, in the early years, these policemen thought they were immune. Now they get more worried, and they get more desperate. Okay? It's, I mean, I cannot walk around this town without a lawyer with me, or a member from San Luca office. I always fear for my life in this country. You have a very beautiful country. I love the food, the people, the architecture, the scenery. Genoa is fantastic. The people here have been so warm. It's just your police and your politicians. I mean, I hope as an Englishman I can give perhaps a different view of this country, looking from the outside, and also of what, your police force has done to, international peaceful people, To this day I still can't understand the mentality of these police, of what they did and why they tried to do what they tried to do to us. I still don't understand the mentality. I can only put it down to fascism. Could the Diaz raid happen again? Well, there was a G8 in 3 years here in Italy. If nothing changes, then yes, there is a very good chance, especially if Fini is in power. In fact, you'll get something far worse than just Scuola Diaz. You'll get massive oppression around the country. Massive. Thousands of people being arrested, taken off the streets. Think about rendition. Fini, he likes that word. Okay? This is one of the reasons I asked Bertinotti for a parliamentary inquiry last October, was to bring reforms to the police, like human rights training, like a new kind of application form for when people want to become policemen. My view is that anybody who says they're a fascist gets promoted in the police force. If you say you're Alleanza Nazionale, you go into the higher echelons of the Carabinieri, Guardia di Finanza, and above. If you're left wing, you go into Stato Police or Municipale, and you stay there. You don't get it's discrimination within the application and process, and whether policemen get promotion or not. Okay. Again, it comes back to the fact of removing fascism from the Italian police force. Can it happen elsewhere in Europe? Well, we've had members of parliament from the European Union, from Brussels, from the Bundestag, from the UK, who have come here, have seen the case, and they have given guarantees that they go back and tell their police forces, right, please read this report, learn from it. And so I am very confident this cannot happen anywhere else, except in Italy, though. It could happen here again. About the differences in law between Italian and UK, for me as an Englishman, I've had to be incredibly patient with the prosecutor's office and President Baroni, the judge. There are times when I cannot understand some of the decisions and the processes, but I have respected and abided by your laws, and have waited over 5 years for justice. In England, this will be resolved in 2.5, 3 years. Including the parliamentary inquiry. We have very strong laws in the UK about police brutality, torture, and about how they should conduct themselves. I have had to, despite limitations of language and of understanding Italian law, I have learnt much about the process, and I almost become as good as my lawyers in understanding where the case goes. Getting to torture. Well, if we do not have the parliamentary inquiry, okay, Scola Diaz and Bolsonaro are on course to go to Strasbourg, European Court of Human Rights. Okay? Now, the penalties from an indictment from Strasbourg are very, very severe against your country. It is something I do not want to do, okay? Because it hurts all Italians. The European Union could suspend Italy from the European Union until you deal with fascism, if we win at Strasbourg, and we will. This is the reason for the parliamentary inquiry, so everything is dealt with in Italy. I am hoping Italy will deal with the justice here, and I do not have to go outside. Now, for Italy to be a member of the EU has to be a signatory of the human rights legislation, Article 7, which includes a section on torture. Yet Italy does not have a law on torture. George Bush can send Muslims here, right, to be tortured under the rendition process, and no one will bat an eyelid here. There's no law about it. And so, I think this year, as we progress setting up the parliamentary inquiry, that a new torture law is going to be one of the major ingredients of this. And yes, I hope maybe in a couple of years you will sign in a law about torture. The parliamentary inquiry is not designed to investigate the police. The trial process has already done this, okay? The criminal side, okay? There is very little left to be investigated from the police side. But because the prosecutor's office and the judge do not have the power to question the politicians who ordered this raid, there is a need for this parliamentary inquiry for Fini and Castelli to go in front of their peers. I am hoping that the prosecutor's office, and when we win the case, that President Moroni will then submit reports to the parliamentary inquiry, so then they can make recommendations about reform for the police, so this can never happen again. In fact, strangely, I've just had an offer from the police union to begin negotiations about these reforms. And so I'm just considering this at this moment in time. I have not said yes. There are many personal and emotional issues involved in meeting this kind of man. I probably will say yes to this meeting, just to hear what they have to say. The head of the police union has said he wants to bring democracy to the Italian police force. I am very interested to hear how he proposes to do that. However, I have to come to terms with some personal and emotional feelings about being in the same room as these kind of people. Just to explain the history so far, the parliamentary inquiry, I saw Bertinotti in October of 2005 with a translator, just by myself. I did not go to the other plaintiffs at that stage because I did not know whether Bertinotti would say yes or not. He was here in town gathering support to become party leader. He failed, but he became president of the parliament. He had many journalists around him, but when he realised who I was, he cleared the room for half an hour, and we sat down and had a very personal chat about Scola Diaz. And I was very happy in, I think it was January, February of this year, to hear that it had been put into the manifesto. And I'm very glad that Romano Prodi is, supporting this motion. It is, it's probably one of the most serious things that he can accomplish as Prime Minister of this country, is to see this thing through, this parliamentary inquiry, because, Italy needs good policemen. If you do not have this inquiry, things will stay the same. We still have, last week we came up short by 2 votes on the Constitution Commission. Gianfranco Fini is lobbying Italia dei Valori and Rosa Di Bugno not to vote for it and to transfer her over to a Fini alliance. And so this is the political battle I'm involved in at the moment. Hopefully in 2 weeks we will secure the vote and the parliamentary inquiry will go ahead. This is the events of what's happened so far. Grazie.